Federal prosecutors say the men who ran this site weren't posting the material themselves. They kept the lights on, decided who got in, and decided who got caught. That's what makes Operation Grayskull different from most cases like it. According to the Justice Department, this wasn't a takedown of a single offender. It was the dismantling of a leadership structure. The administrators of a dark website built around child sexual abuse material, now facing lengthy federal prison sentences after a years-long investigation. Here's what we'll cover. How investigators say they identified the people actually running a hidden site, not just its visitors. Why the Justice Department treats who operates the site as a bigger prize than who used it, and what happens once a case like this reaches sentencing. We'll stick close to what's been reported and say plainly what hasn't. According to the Justice Department, Operation Grayskull was a multi-year federal investigation targeting a dark web network built around child sexual abuse material. Prosecutors described the people sentenced in the case as the ones who managed the site, not simply people who accessed it. That distinction matters, and we'll come back to why. The Justice Department frames this case as part of a broader federal strategy. Instead of treating every prosecution as a one-off arrest of an end user, agencies are increasingly aiming at the infrastructure, the administrators, moderators, and technical operators who keep these networks running. Take down the leadership, the theory goes, and the network doesn't just lose one member. It loses its spine. We spent time going through how the Justice Department has described these network takedown cases publicly, and one thing kept standing out. These investigations almost never start with a single lucky break. They start with patience, sometimes years of it, before an agency even knows whose name it's chasing. That patience is the first real obstacle in a case like this. Dark websites don't sit on the normal internet, and they're built specifically to resist the kind of identification federal agents need to make an arrest. Investigators can't just subpoena a hosting company the way they might for an ordinary website. The site's traffic is routed and anonymized specifically to defeat that approach. So agencies working cases like this typically rely on a mix of digital forensics, undercover access, and international cooperation, because a server can sit in one country, its administrators in another, and its user base spread across dozens more. According to the Justice Department, cases like Operation Grayskull unfold over years, not weeks, because identifying the actual operators, not just intercepting traffic, takes that kind of sustained work. The investigation reached its conclusion. The site's leadership was identified, prosecuted, and, according to the Justice Department, sentenced to lengthy federal prison terms. Case closed, you might think. But the more interesting story isn't the ending. It's the structural choice the Justice Department made about who to go after in the first place, and that's worth sitting with. Here's the general context worth understanding. Under federal law, operating or administering a site dedicated to child sexual abuse material carries some of the most severe penalties in the federal criminal code, often exceeding the sentences given to individual end users who access the same material. That's not incidental. It reflects a deliberate charging and sentencing philosophy. Federal prosecutors have increasingly argued that administrators bear a distinct, heavier form of responsibility. They're not passive consumers. They're the ones who built and sustained the platform that made the material accessible to others in the first place. When the Justice Department describes a case as being about the operators, not just the users, that's the legal and philosophical distinction they're drawing. What's most surprising about that distinction isn't the logic. It's how long it took federal strategy to fully embrace it. For years, high-profile cases in this space centered on prosecuting individual downloaders, one at a time, while the platforms themselves kept operating under new names and new administrators. Operation Grayskull represents the alternative approach. Go after the scaffolding, not just the people standing on it. That approach comes with its own obstacle, and it's a legal one, not just a technical one. Identifying a site's administrators with enough evidentiary certainty to bring federal charges, as opposed to merely identifying its users, requires proving something harder. Not just that someone visited the material, but that they controlled access to it, moderated it, or kept the infrastructure running. That's a different evidentiary bar, and it's part of why these leadership-focused cases take longer to build than user-focused ones. Investigators have to establish operational control, not just presence. Here's the take that'll probably draw some disagreement. Focusing federal resources on administrators over individual users is the right call, even though it means fewer total arrests per case. A single administrator prosecution can functionally end a network that thousands of individual users depended on. Chasing every individual user one at a time, by contrast, is a strategy that lets replacement platforms spin up as fast as agencies can make arrests. If the goal is actually shrinking the size of these networks, not just generating arrest numbers, targeting the people running the infrastructure is the more effective use of a finite number of federal agents and prosecutors. Do you think that trade-off is the right one? Fewer defendants per case, but a bigger structural hit to the network itself? Or should agencies still prioritize the sheer number of individuals removed from these platforms, even if the platforms keep surviving under new leadership? It's a real disagreement among people who follow this area of law enforcement policy, and it's worth having an opinion on. It's worth being precise about where this case currently stands. According to the Justice Department, the individuals identified as having managed the site have been sentenced. As with any federal case, anyone named in connection with charges is presumed innocent unless and until convicted in a court of law. Where the Justice Department's announcement describes sentences already handed down, that reflects the outcome of the legal process for those specific individuals, not a presumption applied to anyone else who might be connected to the broader investigation. Multi-defendant network cases like this one sometimes continue to develop after the initial announcement, as investigators follow leads outward from the core administrators toward other participants. There's a line in how the Justice Department typically frames these announcements that's easy to skim past, language about the investigation being part of a broader federal effort. That phrase is doing real work. It signals that Operation Grayskull isn't being treated as an isolated success story. It's being positioned as a template. The same forensic and international cooperation playbook used here gets reused on the next dark web network and the one after that. That's part of why the Justice Department publicizes cases like this one as prominently as it does. Accountability for this specific network, sure, but also a signal to the operators of the next one that the same methods are coming for them. Put yourself for a second in the position of an investigator on a case like this, spending years accumulating small pieces of digital evidence, unable to say anything publicly, watching the network keep operating the entire time you're building the case against the people running it. That's the unglamorous reality behind an announcement that reads, in the end, as a single paragraph of sentencing news. So where does that leave the open questions? What isn't yet public, and what we won't speculate about here, includes exactly how many additional individuals connected to the network's user base may still face charges, the full technical method investigators used to trace the site's administrators, and whether any international law enforcement partners played a role in identifying them. The Justice Department's public statements on cases like this are typically limited by ongoing investigative concerns, and it's common for more details to surface well after the initial sentencing announcement. If you want to verify any of this yourself rather than take a news video's word for it, that's exactly the right instinct. Go check the primary source. We cut a few procedural details from this script for length and clarity. If you want the fuller breakdown of how these dark web takedown cases typically get built evidentially, tell us in the comments and we'll consider it for a follow-up. The broader pattern here is worth remembering the next time a similar case makes headlines. Federal law enforcement's current strategy against these networks isn't measured primarily in arrest counts. It's measured in whether the infrastructure itself survives. According to the Justice Department, in the case of Operation Grayskull, it didn't.